I'm happy to be joined with the CEO of Ceres Group Holdings, Joe Crouthers, joins us. How are you, sir?
I'm great, Chad. How are you doing?
Good. You're based out of LA. And before we get into all these business talks, I really want to find out who you are, your company, and most importantly, what's the important role, I guess, that you play within the U.S. cannabis landscape?
Well, that part's evolving. It feels like every day.
Yeah,
What
I
role
bet,
we
huh?
play. But yeah, I'll get into that some as well. My name's Joe. Run a company called Ceres Group Holdings, which is a cannabis-focused investment firm.
Yep.
We've been in business now since late 2016.
Okay.
Which I guess sort of makes us some of the gray hair in the cannabis investing in the
I know,
cannabis
huh?
investing room.
Yeah.
But yeah, we've been doing this for 5 years now. And then just recently, last March, we sponsored a SPAC, which in I guess just a week shy of a year from when we took that public, we announced a deal with a multi-state operator here in the U.S. Called Parallel. So we just announced that a couple of weeks ago, and we are sort of on the doorstep of raising our second fund, which will again be focused solely on cannabis, hemp. Psychedelics will be a part of that as well, and sort of the evolution that's going on there. Very excited about a lot of those components. So I think it's a great time to be having these conversations, investing in cannabis. Everybody always asks, where are we in this process? And I until just recently, I've said we're still batting practice. The game hasn't even really started. And maybe now we're in the bottom of the first.
Yeah.
Just sort of getting there.
Jason Ackerman was telling me that last week from Ceres, and he's like, we're barely even scratching the bottom of the first. Then I spoke to another CEO, and he's like, jeepers, we've been doing this for 5 or 6 years, and that's all where we're at. This seems like a long ways to go, but needless to say, there's a ton of obviously interest that's continues to grow in the U.S. cannabis landscape. You brought up the word SPAC. Where do we even start here? It's amazing how much interest this has garnered here in 2021. But the craze is, taking the market by storm. The cannabis sector is obviously no exception, with the parent company, otherwise known as Submersive Capital, led by Michael Auerbach and Jay-Z, listing back in January. This garnered a ton of attention in the investment community. So I wanted to ask, how are investors' appetites for well-structured cannabis SPACs looking in the current climate right now?
Look, I'll tell you if it's helpful. One anecdotal piece of this would be, we raised and announced a couple weeks ago a $225 million pipe into this Parallel deal.
Wow.
We had nearly 600 million in demand.
That's incredible.
And this is in you'll call it a 3-week period.
3 weeks.
It was a very quick process that was a little bit atypical. Typically you would go out, work with your investment bankers and go out to the institutions and do what they call a roadshow. Well, we were sort of so overwhelmed so quickly with demand that we essentially didn't do any of those things. We just took orders, and were able, lucky enough to be able to essentially sort of really pick and manufacture what that list was going to look like in terms of the folks involved. And a really sort of interesting piece to this behind the scenes is that there are this is what I found during this process, there are a lot more large financial institutions in the US that are willing to invest in cannabis now. They're not talking about it publicly, but they are doing it very quietly.
Do you think
that starting to see a lot of those names move in?
Does that come to more fruition, you think, over the next 8, 9, 10 months, or like some point in 2021 where it becomes more public? And if so, like, does the MORE Act, Safe Banking Act, does that have a lot to play? And if that gets passed, again, is it become more of like a well-known topic of conversation with people knowing the amount of banks that are investing in this space?
Yeah, look, I think banks and large investment firms are chomping at the bit to get into this space, right? And what's kept them out is the structural problems, obviously, with federal illegality. So I think as soon as you see something like a Safe Banking Act, that's when you are going to see changes, I think, pretty quickly in terms of who the investing base is in cannabis. Or maybe it's not necessarily changing, it's just coming into the light a little bit more, because again, they are sort of already starting to dabble. But yeah, I think you're right. Safe banking would make a big change there, just because if nothing else, it signals to these institutions that, look, the compliance costs versus the business that you're trying to garner here, we think that now can make more sense, right? It's going to bring down those costs and make access for them, I think, a lot safer and easier. So I think that's where you see them get more active.
Well, some of these other investment banks, like a story I was finding out, Curaleaf raised $275 million, oversubscribed 18 minutes, 18
Yeah.
minutes. So that gives you a clear indication of where this is headed. I want to
Yeah.
talk about your business combination agreement with Parallel, as you've mentioned, which is
Sure.
one of the largest privately held, vertically integrated multi-state cannabis companies, an implied valuation already of $1.8 billion. So
Yeah.
why did you see Parallel's assets and operations as a good fit to your overall business plan moving forward?
Yeah, look, this is a company that I think SPACs get a bit of a bad reputation.
Yeah.
You hear a lot that they tend to do business or merge with companies that aren't ready to be public yet. That are sort of getting this sort of skipping the normal process, right? And I think that was, for us, that was a big part of what we were looking for, was who's really ready for this step, who can handle it, if you will, right? And handle it sort of means a lot of different things, but it starts certainly with the folks involved and at the top, right? So you take a former public CEO and Beau Wrigley, who's built a business like this before.
Yeah.
Obviously, gum and candies are not the same as cannabis, but there are a lot of overlaps there, and how to sort of conduct and deal with life as a public company. I think we are getting, in this case, we're getting one of the folks in the industry that knows this better than just about anyone and has done it before. And the leadership just below Beau as well is very strong at Parallel. So that gave us a lot of comfort throughout this process, knowing that they'll be able to handle what comes up. And then look, it's their current situation, as I said, being ready to be public, doing nearly 450 million of revenue expected this year, over 100 million in EBITDA. That's a business that's ready to make that type of a move.
Yeah.
And their current footprint, I think, really lends itself to. I think there's still a lot of excitement sort of to come for Parallel. They're one of 3 license holders in Texas. I think that's a really interesting market.
Big state, big opportunity, does not get a lot of attention, right? 30 million people in that state, right?
Yeah, and then you add 140 million tourists every year, and you've got a very real market. I mean, it's probably the largest black market in the world, and in terms of an individual siloed community.
Point. It's fascinating, the household names that are getting involved in this industry. As you said, Parallel CEO is William Beau Wrigley, an heir to the Wrigley's chewing gum empire, where he took over the business in 1999. This is a big name with big brand experience. So what advantages does it present for a company when you acquire top CPG executive talent with regards to advancing the company?
Yeah, look, it's connectivity, right? Which is what one of my partners, Scooter, sort of brought to this transaction as well, right? Cannabis companies have all the typical business challenges, and then add a few more interesting walls, sort of stuck in the middle of the process that they have to figure out how to navigate. And so I think when you can pick up the phone and call governors, and you can talk to politicians, and they know who you are, what you're about, I think that connectivity, you almost can't quantify it, because I don't know where it ends up being super impactful, but I know it will be impactful in several different ways. And it could be on the political front. It could be on just how do we deal with consumers, managing the business more generally. What is the investing public looking for? What makes sense? How do we sort of navigate, I think, the sort of ever evolving landscape of cannabis? I think the fact that he's done this before, and has a very experienced team. We just hired the CFO from Walgreens, and this was the CFO at Walgreens, not a regional vice president of finance, right? So a lateral move into cannabis from a company of that size and of that influence, I think, is a really great indicator for the industry in terms of people believing where this is going and what the opportunities are.
Interesting question when I was reaching out to our investor base, and this was an important and interesting question: is developing CBD chewing gum something in the plans once the business acquisition takes place? That was an interesting one. What are your thoughts of that?
Yeah, it's funny. A lot of folks ask that question.
I'm sure they do.
And no, but we don't have any plans yet to do chewing gum. But look, I think nothing's off the table. If the sort of delivery mechanism gets to a place where that gum can taste good, and deliver on what it's promised to do, I would say Beau is probably willing to entertain it.
Imagine a bunch of ball players at the ballpark chewing CBD gum and just chilling
Big
out,
league
right?
chew, the old big league chew pack with CBD.
Yeah. Want to shift my attention now, and I know that you guys have obviously made some interesting investment decisions related to the psychedelic space, and there's a lot of similarities with psychedelics and in cannabis regards to an investment community. Um, Tremendous growth, this industry, and a lot of research taking off. And I think that's a big difference between the cannabis and psychedelic space from the beginning. Your thoughts on the industry and from a pure investment standpoint, where do you see it, I guess, progressing and developing again over the next, say, 12 to 24 months?
Yeah, it's interesting when you sort of think of cannabis and psychedelics sort of side by side,
I
right?
know.
Cannabis sort of comes out first. It's more widely accepted early, but certainly people today look at cannabis as there certainly are medical benefits. I think that I'm speaking sort of generically here.
Yep.
You look at cannabis as well. There's a large recreational component there. I think, however, psychedelics are looked at by a lot of folks as could the sky's the limit in terms of the medical efficacy there and the benefits down the road. I think that's one thing people are sort of losing a little bit of sight with in terms of cannabis. But you're exactly right that psychedelics have started at a different time and are being ramped up a little quicker on that front, and that you haven't seen the cannabis research sort of go where I think it should go. Which again is sort of a reason that at Parallel we were very excited about this deal, because they are focusing on rare cannabinoids, production of rare cannabinoids, siloing outcomes, getting certainty of delivery methods, those types of things that I think are very important for all of us in the industry to be thinking about. But look, the opportunities around psychedelics, I think you're right. There's a lot of exciting, I think still a lot of very exciting news to find out in that arena. And you're right, folks are much more focused on the medical efficacy there than they seem to be with cannabis. But I think there's a lot to learn about both. I think we are going to learn a lot more about cannabis in the next few years as well.
Well, the regulation even being applied, CBD is getting cleaned up tremendously in the U.S. as well. And, I think the proper things are being done. Crazy expectations, I think, from an investment standpoint when people got involved. But now that we're starting to see a lot of this stuff come to fruition, you see all the big names that are getting involved. Obviously with the various SPACs with Jay-Z taking place, even Shaquille O'Neal, big opportunities in this space. And it's endless. But needless to say, times are changing, but these industries are just so polarizing. And it's great to see, really.
Yeah, look, the attitudes are changing. I think that's very clear. And there are still a lot of old sort of overhanging stigmas that we do still have to work our way through. But I think, bringing in real talent into the industry, I think doing that research, I think those things are going to, I was saying this the other day to someone, I have a 6-month-old daughter. She won't know the world without legal cannabis, right? I have a feeling by the time she's old enough to understand all of this, she'll wonder what the heck we used to be thinking.
I know.
Why would it have not been illegal? So I think that's a really interesting component to this. And to some extent, we have to be a little bit patient, right? Because just nothing changes as quickly as we'd like it to. But I do agree that it's gaining steam.
What excites you?
Psychedelic and cannabis.
What excites you the most as we move forward, as far as the U.S. Cannabis landscape presents itself from an investment opportunity?
Well, growth, right? I mean, you start to deal with numbers that, I mean, how many industries over time have you been able to look at, and as a new state, for instance, comes online, you can with pretty solid certainty predict what the demand is going to look like there.
Yeah.
There aren't many industries where you can really say that. And I think every single time we see a new state legislature, pass either whether it's medical or recreational, you see those numbers very quickly sort of come to fruition. Now, obviously, as you said, there were some expectations that are a little bit irrational, I think, in terms of how quickly these things were going to occur. But as they occur, they pretty much happen like we sort of think they will, right? You sort of work through a medical program, you loosen a medical program, more qualifying conditions, and then a couple of years later, you're recreational.
Yeah.
And hopefully you've got the players coming into that market that can deliver on that. And that's sort of to your point about CBD that I think was a bit of a bummer, if you will, is that it got out over its skis too quickly. And there's a lot of mediocre products branding themselves as CBD. So I actually think real CBD and a lot of those cannabinoids can deliver on exactly what people think they're capable of doing, but most of the products out there cannot. And I think that's a problem because it gives everybody a bad name.
Yeah, the feedback I'm hearing just from the U.S. Hemp Roundtable and some of the protocols that are now required is really cleaning up the industry, which means a flourishing opportunity for the companies that meet those requirements. So,
That's right.
listen, you and your team, very sophisticated, well connected, a lot of business opportunities that you're putting into play, and we really appreciate you taking the time to connect with us here today and giving us an idea of the landscape of, like, you know, the U.S. cannabis industry, and as well, right behind it in the rearview mirror is psychedelics, fast on its tail as far as its growth. But let's keep in touch. Want to have you on again as we continue to develop into further down 2021. But in the meantime, have a great day. Appreciate you taking the time, and let's touch base again soon.
Sounds good. Thanks, Shad. Appreciate your time.
Appreciate it.
All right.